Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Here at Bulletproof Selling, if you haven't heard it yet, you're going to hear it today. Hope is not a sales strategy. Why do I feel so strongly about this? Well, in my role as a Marine Corps war correspondent, I was able to work with some of the highest performing military folks on the planet. Think Green Beret, Navy SEALs, Marine Corps snipers, all the cool folks you see in the movies. And what I realized, mission after mission, these folks did not wing it, because winging it on the battlefield means some folks aren't coming home. So to achieve their missions, to bring as many folks home as they could, they had to fall back on something that was more powerful than hope, because their environment was changing all the time, just like your environment is changing in sales. So what they did with hope was they replaced it. And what they replaced it with is what we talk about here at Bulletproof Selling. It works on the battlefield, and it works on the battlefield of business too. So since day one, we've been bringing on folks here at Bulletproof Selling, other sales leaders, folks that are best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, those that are out there managing sales teams, that are on the ground every day on the front line with their folks, making sure that they are not falling back on hope, because hope is not a sales strategy, just like it wasn't a strategy for us. So out of every one of these episodes, we identify an area where folks may be falling back on hope in sales. We build a system. That's the secret word here, systems. That's what you replace hope with in sales. We build that system that you can use as a listener or as a viewer, no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. Now, something that happens to a lot of salespeople, you're making calls, you're getting accounts in the pipeline, you start closing those deals. But chances are, in most business models, unless you are just a straight appointment setter, you're going to have to communicate with those folks after they become customers. You may even be responsible for delivering some of what you've promised these folks. Well, guess what? The more successful you become, the less time you have to fill the other end of your pipeline, to make sure that next quarter and next year, you've got folks that you can sell to. If you spend all your time servicing your current accounts, it makes it very difficult to scale up, to scale your success. So that, among many other issues, is what we're going to be talking about today. And I have one of my favorite type of people on as my guest today. If you've been with us for any length of time, you know my favorite type of people are my veterans, especially the veterans that are leading sales teams. Why? Because they get the power of systems. Now, today's guest had a job that we haven't been able to have on Bulletproof Selling yet. He was a Navy aviation ordnanceman. So you think those Navy ships that they're launching planes off of, somebody's responsible for putting the ordnance, the bombs and the bullets onto those aircraft. And that was our guest today. So in addition to doing that at one point in his life, now he's a VP of sales. So it's my pleasure to welcome onto the show, Mr. Josh Patton. Josh, welcome, sir, to Bulletproof Selling.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yes, sir. So first, I want to hear about some crazy stuff that you did in the Navy, because Marine Corps, obviously, Department of the Navy. Sure, you had some Marines running around on your ships, but talk to me a little bit about how you transitioned loading bombs and bullets into leading sales teams, because a lot of people say the military doesn't prepare you for civilian life. I'd be curious to learn what you actually experienced there that you now use as a sales VP.
There was a lot of things that we learned in the military that transitioned really well to civilian life. But, I spent most of my time deployed while I was in the Navy working on the flight deck. And on our final cruise, I was given the opportunity to lead our shop during nighttime operations on the flight deck. And that kind of set the stage for my leadership career. I really enjoyed leading people. I enjoyed putting plans together and seeing things come to fruition and being able to execute and really rally around a common cause. And so, that along with all of the, skills that you develop in the military in terms of, discipline and focus and grit, all of those things kind of led into this leadership career that now has spanned, 20, almost 24 years.
No, that's amazing. And talk to me a little bit about the size of team that you're leading now, what it is they're selling, who they're selling it to.
So I've got a bit of a dynamic role. I've got, about 10 salespeople that I'm leading, and I also am a people leader in other parts of our business. But focused on the sales side, we've got, a team of people that are focused on calling on end users. They're calling on electrical contractors, general contractors, And then we've got specialists that are on that team that slide in to do kind of value added services and things like that.
And then the sales cycle that you have, it sounds like then your folks are selling, but they're also responsible for managing that client relationship even after the sale. Tell me a little bit about that because I know a lot of listeners are in a similar model.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of our customers are longtime customers. So there's a lot of relationship building and managing that happens over the course of several years. And we've got guys that have been calling on the same people for 10, 15, 20 years, and so those relationships are deep, and they're rooted in trust and the ability to deliver, and being authentic and bringing value to the customer. um, and so it's terribly important. Relationships are the foundation of what we do. We can't really sell anything unless people buy from people. So um, you can't really sell anything to someone unless you start that relationship, you like each other, you trust each other, and you kind of start with that good foundation.
And it becomes difficult at some point, and I referenced this in the intro of the show, when you've got a great group of accounts and you like working with these people, they like working with you. That's awesome. But it kind of limits company growth because you can only sell so much downline to existing
Yeah.
accounts. You do have to find new people, new territories, new markets. Where do you see your salespeople kind of running into a little challenge there? Because we only have so much time in a given work week, don't we?
Well, business development is a key part of a sales role, and too many times I see sales roles or sales reps build a really nice package and go into what I call manage mode. And in manage
Mm.
mode, it's easy to lose momentum. It's easy to get too comfortable and ultimately become too financially dependent on a finite set of customer and their buying habits. So you're living the good life, you're getting paid, your customers are happy, the company is pleased, you're making money until something happens. And something
Mm.
always happens, whether it be a contact turnover, a change in business strategy, too many operational issues that are mounting. Customers will churn at different times, even if they've been long-term customers. We've seen customers that we've had really healthy business with in several different disciplines, and we may get shut down in one particular discipline overnight because of an operational issue, and it could take months to get that going again. And so it leaves the rep in a panic because they're not only at risk of losing commissions, but the pressure starts to build as their metrics move into a negative direction. And so keeping business development as part of your day or week sets the stage for new opportunities. And it also helps you keep sharp as a sales rep. This is the foundational behavior, much like rudiments for a drummer or training for an athlete. New business development keeps us sharp, and it keeps us planting the seeds that we continue to sow throughout our sales career.
And you mentioned that not just the frontline effects of not having the business, which is going to be a hit on the pipeline, but you mentioned some
Mhm.
lagging indicator effects, which are like that spiral of anxiety that starts to well, I have this goal that I'm supposed to hit. My existing accounts are doing great, but if one of them leaves, and in a lot of businesses, a lot of their revenue comes from two or three accounts. If one of those folks banks out and I've got nothing else to fill it to backfill with, oh man,
Mhm.
that's just not a good quarter. It's not a good year. So
Yeah.
where do you then, because this is obviously business development has to start with today, getting those accounts in
Mhm.
place. Now I've got that 10, 20-year relationship in. So at some point I had to learn to do business development, but now it sounds like making the time may be one of the larger challenges. So where do you see the sales team that you're leading now? Well, where are they falling back on hope that those existing accounts might just stay there and continue producing revenue? And where does that hope, because I'm sure you've seen it happen in the last few years, where has that hope failed when one of those accounts has that strategy change, has that different direction they need to move in, and suddenly, no matter how hard I try, I'm not doing business with that account anymore. Where does hope factor into all this?
Hope is not, you said it, whenever you kicked off, hope is really not something that we can count on. It's really about, defining your goals for yourself and for your business. And it all starts with goals. We talked a little bit as we were preparing for this about our sales kickoff, and our sales kickoff every year is really about setting the direction and really building the momentum for the year. We want to put a little bit of pressure. A little bit of pressure is good. It helps people kind of focus. It helps people stay on target. We build up a slight amount of pressure and say, here's what we're looking at this year. Here are the economic impacts. Obviously, we're going into a year with some economic uncertainty. It's an election year, and that always kind of impacts our business a little bit. So it's really about defining your business goals, researching your targets, identifying some potential partners and customers, and moving forward to start building relationships and really understanding what those targets are looking for and figuring out how you can align your value proposition to those customers. And talking about time, it's something that I hear all the time. I don't have time. I've got all these customers. I've got a full load. Even if you can take 10%, that's really kind of my metric for our team is 10% of your week. So if you have 40 hours in a week, take 4 hours, half a day, and stop in somewhere. Ask one of your customers for a referral to someone else that you enjoy working with me. Can you talk to so and so over at XYZ company? I'm really trying to get in there. Can you make a call for me? And our sales guys sometimes are surprised at how easy it is to get a referral, or how easy it is to just stop in somewhere and drop off a card and say, hey, I just want to tell you a little bit about our company. Talk to you about some of the value we can provide. Is there a good time that I can stop by? And so it doesn't take a lot of effort. It just takes a plan. And that's really what I try to reinforce with my team.
So let's build that plan. We were going to call this a system because that's essentially what a well-executed plan is. If we can replicate it,
Hmm.
it is a system. And you mentioned a couple of things I want to make sure we touch on when we build this system. You said, first step is probably streamlining how you're servicing your existing accounts because you have to
Hmm.
free up time somewhere. So that's a great first step. And then you also mentioned, getting referrals from your existing accounts, great way to start sourcing new business at the fresh end of the pipeline. And then, of course, getting back to the basics with filling the pipeline. At some point, you had to identify what are some target accounts that I don't have contact with yet. How do I get into that organization? How do I provide value? How do I begin to develop those relationships? So each of those elements, I'm sure, is going to play into this system. Now, I know, being on Navy ships myself, I was able to do some tours on the Kearsarge and the Baton, watching all of you sailors run around, especially during general quarters drills. There's a system there. And what that system allowed us to do is remove hope. So if they're sounding general quarters, and for folks who don't know what that is, that's like we don't know exactly what's going on, but some stuff's about to go down. Man the battle
Hmm.
stations. That's what general quarters is. It was so
Right.
cool to see everybody know exactly where their place was. And it was the one time y'all had permission to just shoulder any Marine right into the wall to get to where you were going. And you had no qualms about doing it. It was so great to see. Because like, you've got to get to that fire station. You've got to get to that gun because hey, the ship may be under
Hmm.
attack. We don't know.
Hmm.
So when we
Hmm.
use systems like that, we remove hope. Same thing in sales.
Yeah.
So when we trim hope away with each new system, we got to think of how we're going to structure that. And of course, in the military, we loved our acronyms. So we use that same one here in Bulletproof Selling. Trimming hope away, we'll use the acronym TRIM. So the T in TRIM is the trigger element. Now, if I'm building a system to make sure that I'm making time to develop new business, taking time away from my existing accounts, I've got to create that time somewhere, get referrals, all the things we talked about. Where am I going to trigger this system, Josh? Is it going to be when I've got a nice, book of a business already? Is it going to be when I'm building that book of business? Should I start, even if I'm a brand new salesperson, building my pipeline from scratch? Do I still want to make time to develop new business? Where do I trigger a system like this to make sure it happens consistently?
I think you have to trigger that system pretty consistently throughout the year because we get
Mm,
into rhythms and we get sidetracked with the whirlwind that happens every day, customer issues and internal issues. And so really it comes down to setting some goals, like I said, and really just kind of preparing yourself. We're talking about making time for business development. Here's some things that I talk to my team about. So using tools to keep track and prioritize their daily and weekly tasks so they can identify and focus first on high priority items. This could
mhm.
be a handwritten list. It could be calendar and time blocking. could be CRM. And speaking of CRM, leveraging that technology to enter and track opportunities and keep visibility high helps you keep some self accountability, but also gives, visibility to the organization so they understand where you're going, where you're spending your time, and, where we can continue to support the sales rep because, I really work for my team. Whenever I hire someone, I'm like, listen, I work for you. You tell me
Mhm.
what you need. My job is to get barriers out of your way so that you can run. Um, the other thing is, delegating non-sales and administrative tasks. This is one thing that I'm constantly coaching my sales team. They feel like they have to do everything and handle everything from start to finish. And we've got a big support team for these people, and they're all very customer service focused, so it can blur the lines of what they need to handle versus what can be delegated. And they'll get bogged down at times with that someone who could support them could handle those administrative tasks so they can focus on growth and quarterbacking issues instead of trying to play every single role on the field.
Mhm.
And this also requires some level of finesse, which people in non-leadership roles can be uncomfortable with delegation and asking people to do things for them. And so I spend time coaching them on how and where to delegate tasks, and building relationships outside of the favors that you're asking for. So you're not just showing up every time you need something. It's just like, working on customer relationships. Your internal relationships are just as important because you're going to have to lean on these people. You can't just show up every time I need something.
And a lot of salespeople find themselves in that position. I know in a lot of industries and companies I've been able to consult with, the salespeople say, I'm the person the customer calls when there's a problem. That works until it doesn't. When you're
Hmm.
responsible for producing new business and managing existing accounts, you have to either manage that or, like you said, delegate it. So that's a
Right.
great trigger system. Make it part of your regular goal set. New business development should be part of your weekly, monthly, quarterly goals. 10% of your
Hmm.
accounts have to come from new business in your pipeline or whatever that looks like for you. And then look at where you can delegate, streamline, and how you service your existing accounts and even how you develop new business. Not every task has to be accomplished by you, especially if you have an organization behind you. So that's a great trigger. Let's move into the element which most military folks really hit home with, which is the R and trim, making this repeatable. So you mentioned a couple of great first steps already, and I'd love for you to dive deeper into each of these if you can. One of them is, all right, I've got to develop new business. I've delegated as much as I can. I've created some time. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 4 hours, whatever that looks like. How am I going to maximize this time? What are my repeatable steps to develop new business when I have an existing book of business? So you said first, you're already talking to your existing book of business, get referrals. So that's maybe step
Hmm.
one, but walk us through that step and whatever other steps you recommend a salesperson go through to make sure they're developing new business while managing existing accounts.
Sure. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of select targets. I think targets are really important. If you don't, if salespeople can't just run with no plan or no system, and so it really comes down to selecting targets. And we use SIT code reports and all the other market relevant resources to do that. Networking at market events, shaking as many hands and meeting as many people as possible, telling your story, but really more importantly, learning more about the customer story. It's really about, talk to me. Whenever I sit down with a new customer, they're always interested. Tell me about, your company. Tell me about what you do. And really, I try to turn the table really quickly and say, I'd really just like to learn more about your business. How did your business start? Where did you guys come from? And it really kind of sets the table for building that relationship. Following contacts to new companies. There's a lot of movement all the time. I mean, if you're calling on, 10 or 12 companies that have, 50 plus employees, there's a good chance that there's going to be movement. So making sure that you're going deep and wide in those customer in those customer accounts so that you have relationships everywhere, because when someone moves, you may be able to follow them to a new company and develop some business there and lean on the credibility that you had built from the last company. And you mentioned, asking current contacts. We get a lot of referrals from current people we work with. And so it's really important to ask. And some salespeople, it doesn't even, it's funny, it doesn't even occur to them to ask that question, you know?
Yeah.
And so some of this stuff is just really simple, but it's really about, you know, defining your targets, maximizing, you know, your relationship potential with your current relationships, looking for referrals, and you know, if you're on your way back to the home office or whatever from a call, you know, keep your eyes open. I mean, stop in somewhere. It's really a lost art. I've got a couple of gentlemen who are really good at cold calling, and they're kind of referred to as our hunters internally. And they're not afraid of knocking on a door or shaking a new hand that they've never met before unprompted. And there's really a lot of benefit to that. And it's really something that you don't see a lot anymore. And it still works. Um, so, you know, those are a few different strategies that we use for new business.
That's amazing. So that last one you mentioned, we actually called that passive and active targeting in the Marine Corps when we were on the battlefield, right? And I love the way that transfers into sales. Your passive targeting are the folks who come in. You could even consider, you know, active referrals from folks you didn't have to pound the door on, but then active targeting, keeping your eyes open, your head on a swivel, as they taught us, to make sure that as you're passing by in your territory, that looks like the type of business I want to do more business with. Let's get in
Mm,
there and find out. Absolutely. Great, great repeatable steps. So we've got the trigger, making it repeatable. And the iron trim is making sure we keep this system improvable. So obviously, you know,
mm,
we were talking before the show, you know, B-17s and the way that they loaded them up in World War II. We learned things there that changed the way that we load ordnance in the 90s
mm.
in the 2000s, because technology changes. We learned some lessons about what not to do because some people might have gotten hurt. We learned ways to be more efficient because Petty Officer First Class Schmuckatelli figured out you could do it this way instead of that way and cut the time in half, right? Just brilliant things happen
Yeah.
occasionally. So if I've got a system now for how to take my existing accounts and develop new business, finding the time, getting referrals, and then keeping my head on a swivel when I'm out and about in town, what am I going to do to improve this system, and how often should I take the time to do it?
Well, I think you have to really notice what kind of feedback you're getting, depending on kind of what method you're using.
Mm,
You know, my salespeople and I sometimes will sit down and we'll break their business down into business types and try to put them into categories, and then we'll do some sales reporting, and we'll notice that, like, wow, 80% of your success is coming from this specific business type. Maybe we should lean further into that. Let's talk about, you know, ways to find some targets in that area. And so it's really about kind of keeping score with how you're doing with each of your strategies, and minimizing the strategies that aren't working, or modifying the strategies that aren't working, and really leaning into the ones that are. You
mm.
know, working with the willing is something that I talk about a lot, you know. And so if you find a strategy that's working and you seem to be running into willing participants with that strategy, I mean, that's obviously something that's going to cause an unconscious, or, you know, even a conscious behavior change, but you've got to be kind of aware enough to notice it.
Yep, that's brilliant. Are you working with the willing? So many salespeople spend their entire day banging on shut doors. But if
Mm,
I notice that this type of door usually opens or always opens, why would I not go try to find more doors that look like that? That's a
right.
great piece of advice. So we've got the trigger, making it repeatable, improvable. The M in trim is measuring this. So if I'm taking
Mm,
the time away from serving existing accounts, whether that's an hour or 4 hours, that's going to come at a cost, right? My existing accounts may have to wait for me to call them back. That's going to, you know, create some change in how they are used to dealing with me. So I need to justify the use of this time now, whether it's an hour or 4 hours. What am I going to measure to make sure that the time I'm spending developing new business is a better way than what I was doing before?
Well, I think it's all in the metrics. You know, it happens to be the first of the month today. So a good portion of my day will be spent pushing out metrics to my sales
Mm,
team, so that they understand, you know, how did the first 30 days of the year look, or the first 31 days actually of the year look. And are there any trends or triggers that we see in this data as a result of the first part of the year? And so it's really about kind of measure, you know, constantly measuring progress and constantly taking a look. Don't spend too much time. We don't want, paralysis by analysis or anything like that, but we do want to keep a really good eye on the data, and use that data to leverage conversations when you see even the slightest trend starting to happen. Maybe one particular product that you're selling, doesn't seem to be taking off in the first part of the year. So get with that customer and sit down and say, hey, let's look at this product line. What's going on? Talk to me about your business. Are you seeing some different trends in your business? Should we adjust how we're going to market together? Um, but it's really about, taking a look at the data and using it to leverage your conversations.
And it's basically everything that we talked about doing in our repeatable steps, which is, contacts have moved right to new positions in new companies. Have I identified how many of my contacts have done that, so I can measure that? How many times have I conducted outreach on those new folks to make sure that they're settled well? Anything I can do to help out? Are they potential prospects now for the type of business we sell, given that they were in the past? Talked about referrals. Are we achieving those referrals? How many are we getting? How many are we actually communicating with and making contact with? How many referrals turn into accounts in our pipeline? So there's lots of
Hmm.
great things you mentioned that we can measure there, all around our new business development goals, which as salespeople managing existing accounts, something that's easy to drop off the table is making sure we are filling the other end of the pipeline. So we've got an entire built out system now, Josh, for how do we make sure our folks are developing new business while managing existing accounts, finding the time, making the time, and then doing all the right things that lead to great results. So thanks so
Right.
much for helping us build that out. I know I'm going to be using this system. A lot of salespeople listening will. If we want to get deeper into your world, how do we connect with you? How do we find out more about the great stuff you're doing out there?
Sure, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Josh Patton, and I'm happy to connect with anybody and talk further. And I love connecting with new people and building my network.
Amazing, sir. We'll make sure we tag you in the show notes so you can do that. For all the folks watching and listening, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to that live stream channel. And of course, if you're listening, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere the podcast can be found, do us a favor, get out there and leave a review. Let other salespeople know that you no longer have to fall back on hope. There is a better way, and it's a way that will not only help you sell more, but help you serve more. So, Josh, thanks so much for making sure that the bombs and the bullets were on the planes that did the great work of our nation. And thanks so much for giving back to the sales community now, sir. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Thanks, Sean.